Broadcasting from Newfoundland, Canada, you're listening to the I Never Cast for This podcast. Get ready for controversial opinions and debates, but most importantly, let's talk gaming. Your ears are in the right place. This is I Never Cast for This.
Hello, gamers, and welcome to episode 18 of the I Never Cast for This podcast. I am your host, Kelthar. As stated at the top of the show, we are all about debates and controversy, but we are gamers first and foremost. And today we will be discussing a massively controversial topic, which is mental health and video games. And specifically today, we're going to cover addiction and gaming disorder. We're going to figure out if gaming disorder is real or not, or at least debate if it's real or not. Before we get into the big debate, though, once again, my name is Kelthar, the host of the I Never Cast for This podcast. And to the right, we have Erebus returning to the podcast. How's it going?
Oh, hey. I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Doing good. I've been pretty excited to talk. We've been pretty excited to talk about this one basically since we started up this podcast. So it's fun. It's great to actually finally get to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, for sure. And returning to the podcast again, we have Athricus. What's up, man?
Thanks, man. Good to be here.
It's great to have you. And we're down to only 3 people today. So, so just because I know Athricus and Erebus have talked about this topic a lot off the podcast, so I know they have a lot to say. So we want to make sure they get as much airtime as possible here. So, yeah, it's going to be fun. But as I said, you are listening to the I Never Cast for This podcast, and just to let you all know, all past episodes have been updated with show notes. So you can watch all past episodes and skip right to the topic of the week and skip all the old news and all that kind of stuff. So that's super cool. And the format of the show is every Monday. Today is actually Tuesday, but generally it's on Mondays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. And you can always watch the show on YouTube as well. And the audio format is all on major podcast networks. And usually we have a trivia game show at the end, but because we have so much to talk about today, we're actually going to skip the trivia today. So before we get into the big discussion, Erebus, how's your week been going? Since the last podcast, how's your week going?
It's been good, man. Working a lot of hours at work, so it's been not as much gaming as I would like, but it's been good. I'm still playing a lot of Brawlhalla, really getting into that and trying to push my elo up back to platinum. I keep getting close and keep getting knocked back down, so really enjoying that. And I'm playing No Man's Sky and got my freighter finally set up. I got really lucky with the freighter that I got, so I showed Athricus that. I'll show you next time you're in VR just to show you how it all works, but it's pretty cool. So I've still been playing those 2 games, and WoW is slowly creeping in, I think, back into our lives. It's WoW has had a major update and a level squish and a stat squish, and the pre-patch is live, and a lot of our friends are playing it. One of my friends in particular, who likely will be on the podcast in a few weeks, Cypher, he had swore off the game for years, and he's back and he's saying it's really good. So I'm really interested to get back into it and kind of get rolling with our characters again and see what Blizzard has done. But so I'm probably between WoW, Brawlhalla, and No Man's Sky will be my 3 I'm rolling with the next little while.
Yeah, it's the same with me, minus No Man's Sky. I haven't really touched that in a while, but Brawlhalla for me as well, trying to climb the ranks and failing. And yeah, that I wonder is it an addiction to WoW that we all have, that we just have to keep going back to it after all these years? I wonder.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for sure. Cool. Athricus, what have you been up to?
Not a whole lot. Just redid some of my computer, added another 1 terabyte NVMe drive. Just trying to get my digital life, my gaming life in order. I hate having to delete shit and reinstall it all the time, so I'm just buying more space. Trying to set up my Quest 2.
He finally got VR.
How's that going?
Got VR again. It's fine, just clearing more space. Now that I can walk around without any wires, I need more space. So I'm trying to empty out the basement and trying to get the link set up and everything, and trying to figure out wireless. And definitely playing some No Man's Sky, starting to play WoW again with Erebus, and that's about it.
Nice. I know you were having a lot of trouble setting up the Quest 2 with your Facebook account and all that kind of stuff, which was hilarious.
That was great. That was fun times.
Still waiting for that YouTube video. It'll go viral.
Oh yeah.
You need to. It would get billions of views for sure.
I'm sure it would.
Athricus was extremely angry.
Yeah. Very unique situation too. I think people should hear.
But it's all sorted out now, which is the main thing for sure.
That's good.
All right. I think we're ready to get into the topic of the week. So as stated at the top of the show, the topic of this week, and it may turn into a series depending on how much time we need for it, but we're going to be talking about mental health and video games. And specifically, at least today, we're going to go over gaming disorder and addiction. So just a disclaimer at the top of the show, I want to get this out of the way. None of us are mental health professionals. Everything we say today is simply our opinion only, and just all through debate and opinion, that's all we have. At the end of the day, we are simply having a friendly debate, exchanging opinions, and nothing we say can be considered factual. The only exception here is Erebus has some experience I shouldn't say some experience, I'd say a fair amount of experience dealing with mental health in the workplace. And do you mind going over exactly what experience you have there?
Yeah. So in my real life, I work in human resources. I have for the past 10 years. And for the last around five, I've been trained as a mental health, they call them mental health first aid professional. So there's actually a course that you have to recertify and do that's similar to your standard first aid that you would do for like your normal first aid stuff. But it's actually focused on mental health. So it's a really cool initiative because it actually takes mental health seriously enough to say that there needs to be, first aiders in the office that are trained in mental health. So I've done that course, and I've dealt with people over like the last couple of jobs that I've had that are dealing with a variety of mental health issues from a work perspective.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool that they actually have that initiative at your workplace. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. So it's good to have definitely a professional opinion on this stuff as well. So let's just start with this. So, like, it's all around the media saying video games make people addicted and causes all sorts of negative behaviors that are not desirable and stuff. But even before we get into all that stuff, why do people start playing video games in the first place? What is it that draws people in about video games? So anyone can take it from there. What do we think?
What draws people into video games?
Why play video games in the first place? Besides, to have fun. Yes, to have fun. But what is it like at the end of a long, like Erebus? I know you've said at the end of a long day, you just want to forget about everything. You just like you have a long, rough day at work. You just want to like unwind with some video games and escape. Is that right?
So for me, I guess it's two things. More of that lately. I like to unwind. So like VR specifically in gaming is a lot more of a draw for me, that I like to sit down, relax, kind of decompress, a little bit of escapism from the stresses of real life. I find like after a long day at work and looking after my kids, and when all that kind of quiets down, wife's gone to sleep, that video games is a very relaxing way to unwind. So I find that, but at the same time, I have another piece of my brain that is shrinking over time, I guess, that I really like. I'm a competitive person, super competitive. And so I really love sports, played sports all growing up. And, I haven't recently, I've kind of stepped away from that with how busy everything else has gotten. But I love competitive video games. Love playing Warzone with Athricus, love playing Brawlhalla, as I said, Smash Bros, anything that you try to be the best at and can kind of show off your skill and try to just kind of rise through the ranks and, all that kind of stuff. So I get a rush from that, a high, if you will. So I enjoy the adrenaline that comes with that and kind of the competitive aspect. And it's a way to, it's a similar feeling that I get from that when I play sports, that I can't get when I'm not playing sports. So video games provides that for me, allows me to maintain that.
Awesome. Okay. So Athricus, how about you? What is it that draws you to play video games? Because we're all gamers here. So what is it that makes you want to play games?
Mostly escapism. I certainly agree with Erebus that it's I certainly enjoy competitive things. I like to fucking win. So I get a little pissed when I don't win, but for the most part, it's just to forget about, all the bullshit, regular work stuff. But I don't know. That's probably what it is. I haven't thought too deeply about it though.
Okay. So I found this this really good resource, healthygamer.gg. He's actually a licensed psychiatrist from Harvard, I think, and but he's a gamer, and he covers all this stuff, gaming addiction and all this kind of stuff. And I found a quote on one of his articles, and it says, excessive video gaming is found to be associated with positive emotions and social relationships while playing. So he starts off by saying, obviously, video games, they're not all bad, right? There are good parts to it for sure. However, he says, problematic and excessive video gaming is also associated with maladaptive coping strategies, negative emotions and attitudes, low self-esteem, loneliness, and poor academic performance. So what do you guys think about that?
He said excessive gaming is
problematic and excessive video gaming.
But what is the definition of excessive video gaming?
Well,
I might be.
What is it to you guys?
I can throw my hat in there. I would equate that to like it's the same as being addicted to anything. The general definition is that it's starting to affect your real life. You don't care. Usually, addicts tend to be then they tend to focus on their addiction and nothing else really matters. So it begins to affect their daily life. So they, instead of hanging out with their wife or their kid, they tend to just want to play video games. They tend to show physical frustration and anger when they're not allowed to do those things. So if it's getting to the point where you're choosing gaming over more important things, I would say that's excessive.
Okay. So he's saying,
yeah, go ahead.
So he's saying that excessive gaming is causing, or it is a subset of these things that you listed out, the isolation and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, according to, this is a segment from the DSM-5, so it says if they're showing these symptoms for 12 months, not symptoms, characteristics for 12 months, so lacking control over their gaming habits would be one. The second one would be prioritizing gaming over other interests and activities. And the third one would be continuing gaming despite its negative consequences. And for a diagnosis, these behaviors must be so severe that they affect a person's family life, social life, personal life, education, and work. And just so I think you guys know this already, but gaming disorder is actually officially recognized in the DSM-5 as a legitimate disorder.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not every psychologist or psychiatrist agree with that it's in there, but
is binge watching TV recognized in the DSM-5?
So I'm glad you said that, because I have a part on that as well. So I read a CNN article that goes over how the WHO actually classifies a gaming disorder as legit. So it's basically saying that one could argue that people aren't necessarily addicted to video games. They're simply using them as a coping mechanism for anxiety or depression. So perhaps if the anxiety or depression were to significantly go down, or at least be reduced or controlled, the gaming maybe also would correlate and go down as well. So there was a licensed psychologist named Anthony Bean. He argues that classifying gaming disorder as a legitimate disorder opens a Pandora's box. So he says, what about those addicted to football or constantly researching things or baking?
That was my initial right away when I heard that. I disagreed with. I agree if they're applying any hobby as causing that, like if you're addicted to TV, video games, sports, working out, anything that you do as an excessive act or like in accession can cause isolation. I guess the argument for gaming is that if you're in your basement on your computer and you're kind of away from your family and away from everything. But I mean, if you are addicted to going to the gym for hours a day and neglecting your real life duties that you have, or you're watching TV, or you're addicted to there's a mountain, like you can list off anything that is to me a issue with the person themselves. And like gaming is just simply a result or something that they've chosen to do or not necessarily chosen. They're addicted to gaming, but it's not the gaming itself that's the issue. It's that they're addicted. They have an addictive personality, and gaming or TV or working out or whatever is the result, or is the result of the addiction.
I would kind of agree with that as well. Athricus, do you have anything you want to throw in there?
Yeah, that's I don't want to say that's a fact, but I mean it certainly makes sense. Like there's nothing necessarily addictive about gaming other than it gets the endorphins going, gets the adrenaline pumping, and that can be addictive, but so can everything else. There's one study I found by a Canadian psychologist actually at Simon Fraser University in British Columbia on rats. And this was in the 70s, early 70s. There was a big campaign. This led to a big campaign. It was studies on putting a rat in a cage and giving it 2 water bottles, one laced with heroin, I think it was, and one was just regular water. And as soon as the rat tried the heroin, it would become addicted, and that's all it would do, and it ended up dying from just overdosing. And this guy is Bruce K. Alexander. He changed the method. He created what was called a rat park, and he made it essentially like a rat heaven. He just put a ton of rats together, give them all the food they want. They could just do whatever they want all day. They could bang it out all day. They could just laze around, do whatever they want. And they had a community, but he also gave them all the choice of the water or the heroin water. And he found that none of them got addicted. They all tried it, and none of them continued on. They just stuck with the regular water because they were generally happy. And that, if nothing, that proves that obviously if you put someone in a cage and give them nothing to do, they're going to become addicted to whatever they can. But if you give them a social life and happiness, or some sort of happiness, they're not necessarily going to become addicted, which to me at least proves that drugs and gaming and sex and gambling and all that stuff, not necessarily addictive things, just you are not a very happy person. Perhaps you have other issues you need to work out.
That's really interesting. I never heard that particular study before. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard one with rats before. It was like rats in a cage, and like if you give like a pleasure center or like just something to survive on food, it's like the rat would just keep pushing the pleasure center over and over and over, and it would die of starvation. I think it's something very similar to that.
Yeah.
Right. But that's really interesting. And that's interesting that you say if someone's life is already going really well, they don't need these other sources of pure pleasure, whether it's gambling or sex or whatever it is, to act as a crutch in their lives, which is really interesting. There's a guy I found on YouTube. He's called Downward Thrust. It's an interesting name. But
you sure you found that on YouTube?
Yeah. But he basically says that gaming addiction severely negatively impacted his life. So he's 33 years old at the time of the video anyway. And he has spent pretty much every moment of every day just playing video games, and now he's just a YouTuber who makes videos about games. But he says gaming addiction severely negatively impacted his life. He said he lost every girlfriend he ever had to video games. He has no meaningful relationships currently in his life. Says all he does is make YouTube videos about video games. He wishes he could go to the park and just make friends. Says he doesn't know how to properly socialize anymore. He would just play WoW and League of Legends all day. But I would argue, like, if video games weren't available to him, wouldn't he just have an addiction to something else? And we kind of touched on that earlier, right? Like, wouldn't he would probably just be addicted to gambling, lottery tickets, Netflix binging, working out, eating, whatever it is. So I think we kind of touched on that before, right? Like, would that not just be an addictive personality thing?
You could certainly replace the word gaming with anything, and that makes sense. Like, if you replaced what he said with, porn, it could be the same thing. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's necessarily addictive, gaming.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of the way I see it too, but the way he was saying his video is basically saying, like, watch out for becoming addicted to games. Like, games aren't like everything. He's like, he regrets so much in his life because of video games, and he blames it all 100% on video games. And video games are obviously a factor, but I don't know. That's the hard thing to say, right? Like, is it legitimately a full-on disorder or not?
The only thing I agree with is that you can be addicted to other hobbies that aren't as detrimental to you. So I agree that through being addicted to video games or playing a lot of video games, that your social skills, if you play video games through your whole childhood and into your teens, into your 20s, and you miss out on, and you're not, doing social things, there is a risk of, obviously you won't socially develop as well, and find that later on in life. And there can be regrets that you missed out on a whole bunch of stuff. But again, I don't think that does happen if you game a lot, but it's not the game being addictive to me. It's the person's personality of not being able to balance, or they have an addictive personality. So they're out, like, again, they're getting it through gaming. But they could make, like, that, to me, that person would get it through something else if it wasn't gaming. So it's not the same to me as it is a drug, as like a crack cocaine, or like I don't view them as the same thing.
So you're saying they're not the same thing?
I think they're the same thing.
No, they're not the same thing. And the reason they aren't is because I can sit here. So I get addicted to video games. I actually think, Athricus, I get addicted differently than you to video games, because you've told me before that, when you play, like you play longer than you want to. Like, there's a lot of things that happen. I think if I'm able to say that on stream, you've told me that you've played longer than you want to. Like, you find it's hard to step away from them. Those types of things. I know I have another friend that, like, literally can't get away from it. I also stay up too late, but I find I can step away from games for 3 or 4 weeks, and you actually did the same, Athricus, recently. You stepped away from games for, I think, 3 or 4 weeks, and you were fine, to my knowledge. And the difference I view from that and crack cocaine is, if I sat down right here now for 3 or 4 days and I, did drugs, those types of drugs, those highly addictive drugs, I would not be able to stop that. And that's not an addictive personality. That's if someone sat down that didn't have an addictive personality and they just, for an experiment, did crack cocaine, how like they would have a scientifically, like, a response, like a withdrawal that is not the same as a gaming withdrawal. And so that, like, I don't view them at all in the same realm.
So I would disagree 100%.
Okay.
I think that, I think first we need to define a few things. There is a big difference between addiction and dependency. And I think a lot of people tend to conflate those two things, but they're very different. So the definition of dependency is it's a physical symptom of tolerance and withdrawal. So, my body is tolerant of games or alcohol or crack cocaine or whatever, because I built up a tolerance to it, because I do it all the time and it makes me feel good and makes me whatever. But if I don't have that, I'm going to experience the common withdrawal symptoms, nausea and diarrhea and whatnot. So that would be a dependency of is more physical, whereas addiction is classified as a change in behavior caused by biochemical changes in the brain after continued use or abuse of a substance. So it's more, dependency is physical and addiction is mental. Mm-hmm. And addiction is more for people who have done something or used meth or video games or alcohol for so long that it's just now, it's completely rewired their brain to the point where if they don't have it, they can get off it for a while and be fine. But because they are chemically or biochemically changed, they have a very difficult time staying off it for long periods of time. So you say, you can go off it for a month or whatever and be fine, but you always come back to it. And that might be just, hey, I want to start playing video games again, but it also might be, I don't find happiness in other things, or at least not enough happiness in other things that I do in video games, because my brain has been changed over the course of 20 years of playing video games.
Mhm.
And now that's really the only thing I can do. I can do that makes me happier. Yeah, I can get off it for a while, but another main difference is how easy it is to fix those issues. Revert back to a baseline, a normal. So dependency in general, and drugs specifically, takes about a week or two for your body to stop, like, just rejecting the situation and to calm down and go back to a normal. But addiction is significantly harder to change, and most of the time, you can't. You're never not addicted anymore. It's just you learn to deal with your addiction and channel it elsewhere, or
Similar to
calm
an
yourself down.
alcoholic, isn't it?
Still similar to an alcoholic. You're always an alcoholic. Like, you can be 600 days clean, but you're going to go off the rail. Like, as soon as you're triggered, which is very easy in an addictive person to come across a smell, or just driving down the street and seeing a sign for scotch or something, that trigger will activate an actual response, and like a dog seeing a bone, it's going to start to salivate. And I think they're very similar.
So that would be more addiction than dependency.
Yeah, I feel like you might be more like what you said with me. Like, I can get off it for a week, all right, and be fine. But that's me getting off of my dependency. I'll focus on something else for a while, but eventually, I'll start talking. You guys are see a preview for a new expansion, and I'm all of a sudden I'm like, holy shit, this is gonna feel great. I can't wait to start playing video games again. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Another thing I just wanted to say is the UN Office of Drug Control, which is like the big drug control company. I don't want to say company, but organization. They've admitted that 90% of all drugs, all banned drug use, is what they call non-problematic drugs, which they classify as, if people do it, they don't necessarily become addicted, and it doesn't necessarily adversely affect their health. And these are studies that they based in places like Portugal, who have completely legalized all drugs, and there are extremely few instances of drug abuse. Most people are completely allowed to do drugs, and a lot of them do, and there's very, very few, about 10% of the people actually have chemical addictions to it. So it's not that chemical addictions are real, it's just they're extremely rare. That's mainly why I think that mostly it's addiction to drugs specifically is, it's very similar to games. You're getting an endorphin rush.
Mental, right?
It's more mental. You've had a tough time. You've had a tough life.
Yeah, they're saying it's basically they're dependent on the things because there's something they don't want to face in their lives. So it could be like they don't want to face pain, so they'll use their addiction to avoid it, or they don't want to think about the next step in their life, or they're all just, these things are an escape to think about potentially painful things. Right?
Yeah, and a lot of people think that if you grab 100 people off the street and for a month you inject them with heroin, that 90% of them will be heroin addicts by the end of it. But according to all the studies, that's just not true. Most of them can go back to a normal life and be fine. And a small subset will, certainly.
No, that part I don't agree with. That part I've studied drug addiction, and to say that 90% of people that, like your stat of 90% the drugs thing, does that include marijuana? Does that include drugs that don't have? That's
not my stat. That's UN Office of Drug Control.
That's what I mean by this. Your stat, the one that you just presented.
Yeah.
When they're saying 90% of
banned drugs, so it certainly
is marijuana
depends on
a banned drug, because that greatly skews that stat immediately, because marijuana is not an addictive drug.
Right, but that's one drug out of the hundreds.
Yes, but you can't say that. You can't jump from marijuana being 90, or if marijuana is included in that on a bunch of other drugs. Heroin is not the same as marijuana. Crack cocaine is not the same as, like, I look at opioids and prescription drugs and different things like that. Like the drugs carry different addictions, like dependencies.
Some are
we want
super
to call
highly addictive. Like a lot of
some things are super highly addictive.
Like, I think,
to say 90% of people, if you put a bunch of people in 100 people in a room, and only 10 of them would be addicted to heroin after injecting it for a week, I think is grossly inaccurate. And I think if you research that, that would be proven accurate.
And there's certain like ADHD medications and things like that, like are very addictive and they're very hard to get off. But again, I don't know if that's withdrawal from dependency or what.
No, I don't fully disagree with what Athricus is saying, because I was grouping them into the same category of addiction and dependency. So if we're going that route, then I can agree to some level that obviously there's a scientific factor and a biochemical factor that has to be weighed in here. However, gaming still has that effect. I'm still willing to concede that gaming does change neural pathways in the brain. I've got articles here as well, if we're pulling out all the articles. The WHO has said that video games can be as addictive as crack cocaine, but it's for less than 1% of gamers. So there's like a very, very small set of gamers that will be significantly impacted by gaming in terms of their brain chemistry and all that stuff that there is addictive. But I would say that if you had the same number of people that played video games, you put them in front of gaming, and you put the same number of people and had them do crack cocaine, I think your numbers at the end in terms of addiction and dependency would be vastly different. Again, I don't view, like, if you watch shows like Intervention and all these studies on drug addiction and talk to people that mental health, and I'm not talking about myself, I'm not that trained, but if you just talk to psychologists and psychiatrists and people out there about drug addiction, like what it does to people and how it ruins their lives physically and mentally, it to me is the drug. Like that like the drug can be directly tied to that. Yeah. Whereas I just think there's an arm's length separation with gaming that is attached to a whole bunch of different things that like we just said, that gaming, working out, TV, binge watching, those types of things are all addictions. And I guess, Athricus, what I'm hearing you say is that they don't have, the dependency is vastly different. So like with crack cocaine, obviously you go through a massive withdrawal. That's just a scientific fact that happens to people.
Certainly.
But the addiction part is the same from what you're.
The argument here is, especially from UN Office of Drug Control, is that it's addiction is severe long-term abuse of a substance, and most people aren't sitting there, constantly shooting up for 20 years and then coming out completely fine. That's not the claim. It's more so you can have you can do recreational drugs, whether that be weed or if you're going to do crack cocaine every now and then, that's fine. If you're an addictive person, you have an addictive personality, you have a lot of pain in your life, you're a victim of some sort of abuse, childhood abuse or whatever, then you're significantly more likely to grab onto that good feeling that you can't find elsewhere, and you become significantly more likely to become addicted. And there's not a whole lot of people getting addicted after 5 or 6 times doing it. And that's essentially what the study is saying. It's not saying 90% of people don't get addicted to drugs. They're saying 90% of the drugs on the market are non-addictive. Yeah,
I 100% agree. I don't disagree with that. 90% of drugs on the market are not addictive. I don't think, like I said, I don't think marijuana and drugs like that, there's lots of drugs out there that I wouldn't classify as addictive. What I'm saying is there are drugs out there that, like methamphetamine, you do drugs like that I think if you have that 100 people in a room thing, you're going to have 90 people. I have to look up the stats, but I think you'd have 90 people in the room that are resultingly addicted to it.
Look at food. Food is the same thing, and obesity is a big thing too, right? I mean,
but that's the argument there. Like, food in general is not addictive. There's nothing in food that makes you need more of that.
Yeah, I was going to say, but that's what I was just going to say. I wouldn't put food in the same category for me as drugs.
I tend to. I would agree with Michael.
Sugar is apparently more addictive than.
But sugar gives you a hell of a dopamine response.
Yeah,
that's designed to make you happy as fuck.
Yeah, I think this is where we're not going to agree on this because I again, if I'm looking at a show like, and I'm using these shows just because I'm thinking of these addicts that are on these shows. So like the people that are 600 or 700 pounds that are addicted. I can't remember what that show is called, but they basically people that they can't walk. They're in hospitals and they have clearly an addiction to eating food and an addiction to sugar. Again, I think that is a problem that can be sourced to the person in terms of like a mental health issue
from
that
Definitely.
right, and then that leads to the thing. What I'm arguing, and we can respectfully disagree on it, is that I do not. I think if I can sit in a room and have a bunch of sugar, I'm not going to get addicted because that's just not. I'm not like that. Like I can eat sugary foods and I'm not going to. Like I do it all the time. I go through a workout phase. I go back and forth. Video gaming, I go back and forth. I don't think if I smoke crack cocaine or do crack cocaine or heroin and you make me do it for 2 weeks and say, Mark, now cut it cold turkey and don't be addicted to it. I don't view that as the same thing. I view that as like that is going to be that is a completely different issue. And no matter if I have an addictive personality or not, I am going to get addicted to that substance. So that's kind of where I'm trying to.
Yeah. So what I'm gathering is
I'm not saying the other things aren't addictive. I'm just saying that I don't view them as the same.
Yeah. So yeah, my understanding is you're saying that
I still think there's things in gaming. I still think there's pathways in your brain changing when you're gaming. I think there's dopamine hits. I think there's all these things that are happening when you're gaming, but I don't think they're nearly to the level of what hardcore drugs does to you. So I don't think it's the same thing.
Yeah. So you're saying gaming is not equivalent to taking, like not the same as a drug, but it could have similar effects, just not the extreme of.
No, and I think it's dangerous to make that argument. I think it's dangerous to make that argument in that for kids and stuff, because I think it can be used as a like people are convinced in their heads they're playing video games and it's the same as doing hardcore drugs and they're struggling to quit, when it's like the quitting of video games and the quitting of crack cocaine is not.
Yeah.
Like I would strategically or from a mental health perspective view them as two different things in terms of how you deal with it.
Yeah. So as Africa said, it's like it's not a physical dependency versus like a mental.
Right. I'm thinking as I'm going along here, I'm getting into a little bit more of the dependency thing, which Athricus has clarified are like he's separating the two. But yes, like dependency, that part of that is the withdrawal piece. But I think that like even just alcoholics, right? Like you look at alcoholics, like they can't have a sip of beer. Like, you know, once you're off of alcohol and you're recovering alcoholic and you're going to AA and stuff, you can't have a sip of beer, or you're right back into it. Is gaming the same? Like in terms of if you quit gaming, that you go back, if you have one, you know, you get on and play one video game, you're right back in there. And is that the person, or is that the actual, like, is that a physical response that you cannot control? Like you just can't resist it because of a physical brain chemistry thing? I would say no.
I would say it's partially the person, but it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about alcohol, like if you spend, 20 years of your life being addicted to alcohol, you're probably going to need to never have alcohol again to get off of it.
Yeah.
Whereas someone who's had alcohol problems for a significantly less amount of time, or have gone through 2, 3, 4 years of alcohol addiction, maybe depending on their personality, can have a drink or two. And it's very.
So, say for me, I've never met an alcoholic. Personally, I've never met an alcoholic, and I've met quite a few that is able to casually drink. I've never met one. I don't know if you guys have. I've never met somebody that has actually defined as an alcoholic and can casually sip, like just have a beer every now and then.
Generally, it certainly would be rare if that's the case.
It depends on what you're defining as an alcohol addiction or addiction in general. Like if you're saying that, I'm arguing that addiction, you have seriously abused it for a long period of time to be classified as an addict in anything. So obviously, if you're saying you've never met an addict who can have a sip of alcohol, I would agree if they've had severe abuse. But would you classify a person that's only had a couple of years of abuse as an addict?
No, but if we're if you're saying it's the same thing, I would say that I'm assuming you would use the argument that if there was an actual gaming addict that was playing games for 20 years and quit games,
Mhm.
that they could not, if we're establishing the same thing, they started at 10 years old, same as the alcoholic. And then at 30, they quit. And then at 40, you've got a game on the table for the gaming addict, and you've got a sip of beer on the table for the alcohol addict. I don't view that as the same thing. I view the gaming addict. There's a way to, I would argue there's a way to rehabilitate the gamer to a point where they can healthfully game. Whereas I don't think you can rehabilitate the alcoholic to healthily drink.
See, I would argue that they are almost the same thing.
I would agree. Yeah, I think they're
But
all almost.
I would
the
say
same thing.
it depends on what kind of game you're addicted to. So if you're addicted to competitive games like League of Legends and you're addicted to the toxicity and all that kind of stuff, and that is what you cannot give up, and if you just play one match, you're thrown back into it, you're fully addicted again. I think that is very similar to being an alcoholic. Whereas if you get thrown into, if you just casually play like Minecraft with buddies and you don't get hooked on it, like then maybe there's two sets of addiction there. Maybe you're not addicted to Minecraft.
Yeah. So again, I disagree, and that's fine. I would argue that with the gaming side, there's a way to help the person with the, again, I view gaming as the outside, right? So I've tried to establish the argument that gaming is the result of an addictive personality. So I think there's a way to address the addictive personality piece for that individual, and then they can get back to gaming in a controlled environment, whether that be switching the type of game they played, like depending on what the issue was, or if it's changing the style of gaming or making it more of a social gaming if they were in isolation. I just think it's a less black and white thing than alcohol is. Alcohol to me is, you are addicted to alcohol, you step away from alcohol, you have a sip of alcohol, and in a lot of cases, alcoholics will admit to you that they will become violently drunk and addicted to alcohol again the second they have a sip of beer, even if it's 20 years later. So I view them as, I just view that you can tackle the issues differently. I think there's similarities. I'm not saying there isn't similarities. I think it's still, without any type of rehabilitation or any type of help, I think that a truly addicted gamer, maybe even the people that I mentioned was that in that study was the 0.5% or whatever. Obviously, there's a certain group of people that probably should stay away, and they're going to run into an issue no matter what you do. But
and I think in regards to being a gaming disorder, from what I've been reading, yes, the prevalence of it is extremely low. So if you take 100 gamers, it's like you said, 0.5% or 1% of gamers are and there's a lot of gamers out there that would probably say, "Oh, I'm addicted to games. I love games." Like we'd probably all say that, but to be actually diagnosed as an actual person with gaming disorder, perhaps this person literally cannot play games without feeling addicted to them.
Mm-hmm.
I still say, yeah, it's very dependent on the person. I just believe that I know for me that I'm obviously not as crazy as, an actual super addicted person that will say, fuck my family, fuck everything, I'm going to go play games.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not far off it. Like I obviously I'm going to go spend time with my wife and kid, but I certainly, given any sort of opportunity, would probably just come downstairs and I certainly, while I'm with my family and playing with my kid or whatever, I'm pretty much thinking about video games.
Right. But I know, but so you're saying you're a little bit of a step off of it. And like I said, and this could be from a lack of experience for me too. Like I'll fully disclose kind of my limitations of my study or what I've seen is that, like, I have met and worked with and talked to and interacted with alcoholics, like hardcore, truly alcoholics or drug addicts, from either a work perspective or a volunteer perspective. So I've seen them, like I've seen what like they're like. And I've met people that are addicted to video games. I've met people that are extremely addicted to video games, but I haven't met, like, if somebody has told me, or if like I've just, like, an alcoholic is typically like there's a lot of common themes and a lot of common things that you see in terms of how people are with their families, how their lives were destroyed by alcohol, or how it was destroyed by drugs, or how they acted. They got violent, different things happened. There's a variance there. Obviously, people are affected different ways, but there seems to be a common ground where a lot of this ends up when people are on drugs or on those types of things, like where they go without any type of intervention. Whereas gaming is, like you're not there, obviously, Athricus, because you still find a way to make time for your family. You still find a way to. I think compare between me and you, I'd say it seems that you get a bit more addicted to games when we get back into them. Like you do get addicted to them for sure. I get addicted to them as well. I think we all three of us do to a degree. I just don't see like, kind of getting addicted to alcohol or kind of getting addicted to drugs. I think it is or it isn't.
I think we're trying to compare the extremes, and I don't know if I'll be able to portray my thoughts here very well, but I'll try. We're all gamers and we're all drinkers too, but we have them both under control. If alcohol was inherently addictive, then wouldn't we all be alcoholics?
Yeah, but I didn't say...
The way I see it is like there's some people who, like you said, there's alcoholics, they have a sip of alcohol, they can't handle it. But there's other people who love to drink. Like they go downtown maybe twice a weekend, right? They get plastered drunk, they go down, they have a time. And some people might say, oh, like every time they drink, they get blackout drunk. But throughout the week, they could have, a couple beer every night, and they don't need to have that blackout drunk feeling every time. But maybe they just, they can get by having just a few drinks a night, or
so those
are
aren't
totally fine throughout the week.
Those aren't. But that's my point, is that they're not. I'm not saying that alcohol in and of itself is addictive. I'm not using the same argument for alcohol that I'm using for like crack cocaine or something like that. I'm just saying that a true alcoholic or a true drug addict, or if somebody has actually gotten to that point, I don't view gaming as the same thing. Like I don't think it can hit the same point with gaming. To your point of talking about extremes, like if I am talking about extremes, so an extreme alcoholic, an extreme crack cocaine addict, an extreme gaming addict, I view the gaming addict as not the same thing. I think that they can be rehabilitated to a point where they can still, in some capacity, play games or interact with video games. Whereas I don't think you can rehabilitate an alcoholic or a drug addict to be able to take drugs casually or alcohol casually.
I feel like the level of addiction can be similar. Like you can lose your family, lose your life with video games and alcohol, but having them both or comparing them both is difficult because gaming is fun and you get into it and you love it, and you're once you have a couple of hours of that and it gets out of your system for the day or so.
So is drinking. Drinking can
but
be
not really. Yeah, that's true, but you also get shit drunk and all your inhibitions go to hell.
But all your inhibitions can go to hell when you play video games too. You can play video games and have a bunch of fun, have a dopamine hit, get super fun with your friends, and then we all get off, and then and then
get up and go to work though.
And then you leave.
I just don't know if we know someone, and it's hard because we know what alcoholics look like, right? But gaming disorder is relatively new, right? Like we don't know someone personally, at least I don't think we do, that is 1,000% addicted to video games. Like if I look at the DSM-5, right? Like I shared a few things, but there's actually 9 criteria. So preoccupation with games, the individual literally thinks about video games all the time. Mm-hmm. 2, they actually have withdrawal symptoms.
Hold on one sec.
Yes.
I want to compare that to alcohol. So everything we're saying,
okay.
Let's also think about alcohol in the same context and see if it is the same thing.
Alcoholics probably think about alcohol.
No, but that's not. Like I said, alcohol crept into this conversation. You use cocaine.
Okay, let's use cocaine
because cocaine, I'm arguing, is addictive right at the very beginning.
Okay.
So.
Number 2 is withdrawal symptoms. When gaming is taken away, it could include irritability, anxiety, or sadness. Right? 3, tolerance. So the need to spend increasing amounts of time engaged in games. Mm-hmm. 4 would be unsuccessful attempts to control or reduce participation in games. So you keep trying to give up games and you can't. You just keep coming back to it. 5 is loss of interest in real-life relationships, previous hobbies, and other entertainment as a result of and with the exception of games. 6 is continued excessive use of games despite knowledge of psychosocial problems. 7 has deceived family members, therapists, or others regarding the amount of gaming. So 8, use of games to escape or relieve a negative mood, so such as feelings of helplessness, guilt, or anxiety. And the last one has jeopardized or lost a significant relationship, job, or educational or career opportunity because of participation in games. Like, to me, this sounds like a drug in itself. It is a full-on addiction that severely negatively impacts your life.
I feel like you're just defining addiction.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was just the general definition of addiction. Yeah, I agree with that.
So I would also agree with that, right? But I think that this quote from Healthy Gamer as well, so just bear with me here. So it is, but I think it has a good point. It says, a lot of gamers started playing video games to escape something in real life. So we talked about that escapism. Maybe they were bullied in school, and when they came home, they were bullied on social media. In such a situation, the only escape for the gamer is a video game. That is the only place where they can immerse themselves and escape the emotional pain of real life. An fMRI study looked at the activity of different parts of the brain in gamers. So the amygdala is the part of your brain that governs fear and negative emotions. The study showed that when your amygdala is active, i.e. when you are experiencing pain or fear, and you start playing a video game, then the amygdala calms down. Video games literally allow us to escape negative emotions and suppress them. So rather than fully experience these emotions, the video games are just squashing them and suppressing them. Negative emotions are one of the strongest teachers for the human brain. If a child touches a hot stove once, they learn to never touch it again. Therefore, since video games suppress our negative emotions, they also make it harder to learn from our mistakes. Thus, people get stuck playing video games, even though they realize that their gaming habit is hurting their progress in life. Since they do not understand why they cannot quit, they start to believe that they are lazy and continue to play video games. So to sum it up, it's basically saying video games are not necessarily the source of mental health problems or addiction. It is possible to be a healthy gamer and enjoy video games as a recreational activity. However, when people do not know how to deal with their emotions, they tend to use video games to suppress them and end up getting stuck in life. And I would argue social media is also this as well, right? If people become sad or angry, they just take out their phone, go on Facebook, and suppress the emotions. So all about the amygdala just being suppressed.
Just sounds like people aren't addicted to video games. They're just addicted to not being depressed.
That's just
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
That's just it, right? So it's literally escapism. It's not the video game, and one could argue it's not the alcohol if we're going that route too. It's just the fact of the feeling that these things give you to help suppress the emotions, suppress the amygdala.
Mm-hmm.
I love fucking alcohol, for sure. If I could have like 6 beers a day, I certainly would. But I know that it would certainly destroy my life if I went too hard into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I could do the same for video games, though.
No. So I don't agree with that, because I view that you can go playing video games 10, 12 hours a day and go nuts with video games like we did throughout our 20s and whatever. And then you step back, right? Have 10 beers, 12 beers for 10 years for like straight and then try to do the same thing. So like that's or have, like I said, cocaine, or have some sort of hardcore addictive drug for 10 years, 15 years and try to step away. I don't think it's the same. It's the same thing. I do think that you could argue that the drug, it's still an underlying issue. You could say that, and I'm actually trying to play the other side now. I'm trying to argue against myself, because you could argue that I'm addicted to the hit of a video game. I'm addicted to the high or the dopamine hit of a video game. I'm addicted to how a video game makes me feel. I'm not addicted to the game. I'm addicted to how a video game makes me feel. Like I'm craving that feeling. Whereas with heroin or cocaine, same thing. You're addicted to not the drug itself. You're addicted to how it makes you feel, right? But I just don't view the same. Again, could be completely wrong. I just don't think it's the same level that you're hitting, or like you could sell your computer, throw out all your electronics, get rid of it all, and I think you have a more of a fighting chance than if you got rid of all the beer in the house or got rid of all the cocaine in the house. I think it would be a lot more difficult for an individual to do that. I think it would be difficult either way. I just think it's not. I think they're just different levels. So I guess I'm still. I guess I'm beating around in circles here a little bit, but I think that's where I kind of draw it. Is that I think they both there's two addictions. I think gaming addiction comes up to here. I think the other addictions come up to like way up here, and I think that's where I just view them as different things.
Yeah, I can certainly agree to disagree. I would argue it's very similar. I wouldn't say here. I would certainly say drugs maybe a little higher, but I don't know if I could agree with that. It's significantly higher. I also think that we should also focus on the what was it? The dependency versus whatever. Once you kick that dependency, obviously if you're trying to get off of booze for within the first week, you're going to be like rocking back and forth in the corner just thinking about booze and wanting to fucking die. But once you can kick the dependency, then it's going to be a lot easier to just say, okay, no, I'll figure this out, and it won't be as bad.
I also think that dependency fuels the addiction. So I think that because of that kick that people get, because of the withdrawal issues and the dependency issues that you have, that fuels the addiction. It makes it harder to quit. It makes it harder to get away from, because one, you're going to go through it, or maybe you ran into that dependency issue and then went right back to the addiction. So I view them like drugs and alcohol is way more dangerous that way than with gaming. You can, without any dependency, step away. You can figure out a way to manage it. There's different approaches. And I guess that just goes into and I think in some ways we're saying the same thing. Like I think we're both saying the addiction. I'm probably, you're separating dependency and addiction, whereas I'm saying the dependency has to be a part of the addiction argument because it plays a factor into the addiction. I
think addiction, I think it's the opposite. I think addiction can fuel dependency. I think an addict, once they kick dependency, an addict that gets triggered because of their biochemistry of being changed, once they get that trigger, get that smell or taste of something, that can refuel the dependency and make them want it more and bring them back to that dependent state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. Like I just, I guess, and I guess you'd have to go down the road of saying, is there people out there that can drink 12 beer a day and then just quit? Is there people that can do cocaine and just quit, and once they're past the dependency issue, they're no longer triggered?
No, and I mean that.
So if you're saying no, if you're saying no, then again I disagree, because there's people out there that play video games for 12 hours a day, and then they, like, as kids, as teens, as 20s, they play and play and play and play, and then they become adults. And I have lots of friends I know that don't touch video games anymore. They have no draw to it. They don't care. They grew up, they had families, they had whatever. And for whatever reason, me, you, and Kelthar always come back to it. For me, it's not addiction. It's that at least I don't think it is. It's because I enjoy playing them, right? But if I have work projects and different things that take me away for extended periods of time, I manage that, and I'm fine. But I just don't view, again, I guess I go back to, like, if I had, from 10 years old, had 12 beer a day all the way up to 30, or I had cocaine for 20 years, and then after that, I'm saying, oh no, like I'm out of that now. Like I can walk away from that now. I don't think that's possible.
But again, I don't think it's the amount you do something. It's whether the thing you're doing impacts your life in a negative way, taking you away from your family or your job, or getting you fired or losing relationships. I
don't think there's an underlying thing for drugs, Michael or Kelther. I don't think there is a. I'll do more reading on this in case this. I think you said this is becoming a 2-part series, so I might come back and disagree with myself. But I don't think there's an I don't agree. I don't think drugs is. I think you can put a. I think you can put a healthy, non-addicted person who has no addictions to anything, and do a study where they take cocaine for a month, and then they go through the withdrawal symptoms and the dependency issues. I think they're going to still have to stay away from it and could still get triggered to come back to it. Whereas I think games are not like that for everybody. I think that they are like it for some people, but I don't think it's like it for everybody.
I think it would be strong. And again, it's the whole how long you've been doing it. Like, obviously, if you do it a month, it's not like you're going to get off the dependency and be like, well, fuck it, I'm never doing that again. I don't care. But you'll obviously be like, oh, that was a good time. I'd love to do that again. I guess the question is, can you go back to just doing it every now and then as a recreational thing, or will you be unable to do so? And if you touch it again, you'll go immediately into it.
But do you hear? I'd like to hear a response from you on that part of the argument that I made, because I don't. I think that's where I'm struggling the most. I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and I kind of go back and forth, but I'm stuck on that teenager or that guy, or I'm sure we can all think of friends that we played video games growing up to a large degree that don't play video games anymore and aren't triggered to play video games anymore. So why is that? Like, if we're saying video games and drugs are the same thing, is that not a stark difference between the two?
Because they're not addicted to begin with. That's the way I see it. Just because you play for 12 hours a day doesn't make you addicted. Right,
but again, I know. Okay, so that if you're saying that they weren't addicted even though they were playing 12 hours a day, that's okay. But it's still. But I'm saying that so you're saying there could be people out there that had beer or cocaine for 12 hours a day, or well, not 12 hours a day, they'd probably be dead if they did that. But if they did a lot and then just up and quit and went through the dependency issue that we've established, but they're not triggered anymore. They're not.
I think what we're saying is, if you're playing 12 hours a day but exhibiting no other signs of addiction other than, I really love these video games and I've got all this time and it's awesome, but you're not neglecting responsibilities or families, then you're not addicted.
That's exactly what I'm saying. If your life is not negatively impacted other than the fact, because if you're playing 12 hours a day, chances are you are neglecting other aspects of your life. Chances are your family's not seeing you as much as they would like to see you. Chances are your job performance is suffering. You're probably staying up too late and like that kind of stuff, right? But I don't think just playing 12 hours a day is enough to, like, what if you're a Twitch streamer and you stream 8 hours a day, right? That's your job, right? Like, you're playing 8 hours a day. That doesn't necessarily make you addicted.
Right.
That's the way I see it. But we are clocking in at over an hour. So as we stand now, because I think we'll continue this topic, and we can go do some more research and come back. Just as we stand now, quickly, Erebus, do you think gaming disorder is legitimate?
I think gaming disorder is legitimate. Yes, but I do not think it is. It is not comparable to. I think it's its own sort of. I think it's legitimate, but it's not the same as drug addiction, or it's not. I don't think you can compare the two.
Okay, and Athricus, what do you think?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Is gaming disorder a legitimate disorder?
I don't really like the question. I think gaming can be put into the same category as gambling and sex addiction and stuff. I don't necessarily believe in gaming addiction. I believe in addiction.
Sure.
And I think the definition of the gaming disorder just is straight up just defining addiction.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that too. Perfect. It's so tempting to keep going on this, but I think...
No, I want to do more research. And
I think we'll break and we'll come back to it in a future episode for sure, and try to come to it and actually put the topic to rest, because that's what we always try to do on this podcast for sure.
I don't think you'll ever put this topic to rest. This topic is like
it's a big one. It's a
big one, and there's a lot of people on different sides of the fence. I was just even Googling there. I don't know if you were, Athricus. Like, you can find articles on both sides. Like, there's some people that really do not think they're the same thing. Like, there's psychologists with articles that just say like it's not even close to the same thing. And then I've read other things that, like, the WHO, the World Health Organization, saying that there are a small percentage of gamers that are showing physical symptoms that are the exact same as somebody that's on crack. So it's like it's obviously a very early adopted type thing. Like, people are still studying it and figuring it out, but.
Especially with children, right? If you take away a game from a kid, like, they can lose their crap, right? Like,
yeah, you can also take a toy away from a kid and they'll lose their crap.
Yeah, Right.
So,
So there's different arguments. Yeah. Go ahead.
I think gaming is relatively early, right? Like gaming, as we would define as possibly becoming addiction, is maybe 90s, late
70s.
90s. Well, I know gaming is 70s, but no one gets addicted to fucking Pong.
No,
okay?
they did. Not
No, they
Pong.
did.
It was Space Invaders or something.
you know, I read that too. I read there was actually a really big problem with some people.
I did. Yeah, it was people in high scores. They didn't want to leave the arcade machines. They were staying all day, all night. Like, oh yeah.
But still, I mean, drugs and stuff have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Like we're going, 30, 40 years, so hundreds or thousands of years. So it's very early in the gaming addiction sphere.
Yes, I agree with that for sure. All right, I think we'll break there, and next time we meet, we'll do a bit more research. We'll come back and we'll continue the topic for sure. I believe it's our first 2-parter episode, so that's pretty exciting for sure.
It might have to be 3-parter.
Maybe we'll see. Before I do all the housekeeping stuff, Erebus, anything you want to say before we go?
No, I think topics like this are important. I think it's important to reiterate we're not mental health experts, as you said, and that people should. There are lots of. I'll say this. There's lots of programs out there, hotlines out there, numbers that you can call that are free, depending on what country you're in, to help with mental health issues. Whether I think we can all agree that mental health issues are very real, whether we disagree on some of the other issues. We all agree that mental health is a huge issue in today's world, and it's becoming more of an issue and is becoming more recognized. So there's a lot of resources out there to help with mental health issues. I think it's also important to note healthygamer.gg. I didn't know who you were talking about, Kelthar, till I looked it up, but I actually watched him on YouTube quite a bit because he actually interviewed Reckful for hours on stream. It's very interesting to watch, and as we all know, Reckful ended up committing suicide. So I think it's important to be recognize, that Reckful, was getting help and obviously had an unfortunate end there in terms of what happened to him. So if you are struggling out there with video game addiction or mental health issues, you should try to go get the help that you need.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, thanks for saying that.
Yeah,
Athricus, anything you want to say before we go?
Just to play off of what Erebus said, not just mental health issues, but if especially in kids, abusive situations, abusive homes, there's certainly plenty of hotlines for that as well. And and that can, like, long-term physical abuse can certainly lead to severe mental disorders and problems in the future. So if there's a problem, there's people ready to help you out. You just got to look for it.
Yeah, I think you guys nailed it on the head there. You guys said some awesome things there for sure. Help is out there if you need it for sure. All right, well, that's going to do it for us. Just for some simple housekeeping, you can follow us on Twitter at INeverCast4this, and you can follow me at Kelthar. If you have any questions for anybody on the panel at all, you can email us at inevercastforthis@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. We have a Discord channel. You can find us on Discord and Instagram. All the show notes for every episode forward has all our social media and everything there as well. And also leave us a review if you like the show. And if you don't like the show, leave us a review anyway and tell us how we can improve.
That means you, James Sampson.
Yeah, we had a unconstructive negative comment last week that on a YouTube video, which is fine, at least they're honest. But yeah, give us constructive feedback. Let us know how we can improve if we need to improve for sure. All right, and that's going to do it for us. And thank you so much for listening today. And we will see you all next week.